I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Welcome to it, folks. I know I say this every time. It's good to be back in the saddle. There have been quite a few times over the last month or so that I've come across topics I thought, wow, I should really talk about that on the show. Some of them are already too old to talk about at this point. But there is one that I want to cover today because it has been a revelation to me that folks don't fully grok this. Now, maybe I'm preaching to the choir. I'm guessing my audience is a little bit more on it than most other folks. But I wanted to make sure and cover it, particularly because right now I have a perfect example of what we're going to talk about today. It's a house I have a listing on that I'm doing the marketing on right now, and without a doubt, I can say that this is probably the best example of passive income I've ever seen. So we're going to talk about that. I'll give you a little bit more details, and if you're interested in considering the property based on this, I'll give you that info during the show. But really what I want to cover, because this really is what kind of got my brain working this way, is what is passive income? I hear a lot of people throw the term around. When it comes right down to it, though, people really don't seem to know what the hell it is, at least in a more general, broad sense. In a lot of the initial... Now, just to give you a little bit of background in the specifics of the property I'm going to give you more info on. I listed this property a little over a month ago. We got into escrow, did an open house, got into escrow almost immediately with a buyer who had pretty grandiose plans, to be honest, in terms of what they wanted to do with the property. But unfortunately, they could not get the financing lined up that they needed to make the deal happen. So we are now back on the market, and going to be doing whenever this happens. It doesn't happen horribly often, thank goodness, for most of my clients. But once we do end up having a buyer that's unable to follow through with their financing or need to back out of a transaction, I kickstart my marketing again as if it's a brand new listing. So I do all the same mailers. Sometimes I'll tweak it, that kind of stuff. The point of that being that you always, for those of you who are buying and selling real estate, this is kind of an aside, you do have to kind of fight that uphill battle of the quote unquote stale listing. If something goes on the market, sells real quick, then comes back on the market, people are sometimes looking at that days on market as a question. Well, why has it taken so long for this home? Why has the home been on the market so long? So it's important to address those things, I think. So if you're someone who finds yourself in those positions, hopefully the person who you're working with is going to be adapting to that and pointing out why the home has been on the market or has appeared to be, right? It actually was off of the market for most of that time. It was just in escrow. Okay. Sorry, I don't know why I felt the need to share that one. So let's talk. See, it's the shiny things. I see the shiny thing and I head for it. Let's talk first about what passive income actually is. Now, in general, when I'm trying to explain to someone what passive income is, I explain it that it is basically money you don't work for. It is money that comes in regardless of whether or not you are doing something. You're not punching a clock. You're not expending labor to make the money happen. But even within passive income, there are levels of passive income, right? Because it's not free money. You have to trade something for it. It's just a situation where you're not trading your time for it. And I thought that this would be a great opportunity to point out the differences and then use the listing I mentioned earlier as an example of what I think is the absolute most awesome kind of passive income. All right, so some folks like to, I've had some folks refer even to in-law suites or renting some part of your house out as passive income. And I suppose it is, in terms of you not actually having to do anything aside from let someone live in your home or on a property that's on your land or whatever, some sort of arrangement that you've made. It could be a variety of different things, right? It could be that you own a duplex and you're renting the one next door. It could be that you have a home that is just designed to have in-law quarters and you're renting out the in-law quarters. It can take along a bunch of different forms. But here's the thing. The stuff you have to potentially deal with, and this is why I'm starting with this as an example, is probably among the most annoying, right? There's someone else living in your personal space, by and large. You have to worry about if their parking is blocking your car from getting out of your garage. You have to worry about whether or not the check is coming in every month. And that's true of everything, but more often than not, in a scenario like this, it's a far more common occurrence. You have to deal with their potential noise. You have to deal with whatever emotional baggage comes along. You have to deal with family arguments that you hear through the wall, right? So that is what you're trading. You're trading a little slice of your sanity for whatever income is generated from that effort, right? So that is what I would say is the first element of passive income that also carries with it an annoyance level. And for a lot of people, that's why they never go into that kind of passive income. They don't want to deal with other people's stuff. I like to think of myself as someone with a surprisingly low amount of drama in my life. And nothing is more annoying to me than drama, manufactured human drama that screws things up, right? A deal isn't happening because someone has got emotional baggage that's associated with it, right? I actually had to talk down a client the other day who didn't want to do a deal because they personally had an issue with someone involved in the deal. And I asked them, what was the name of the last person that sold you a car? And they couldn't tell me. And I said, you know what? In a year, you're not going to remember the name of this person, but you will still remember all the zeros in your bank account because of how well this deal went. So that's one kind of subtle one, and I'll tell you, I've been in scenarios where I've thought, you know what, this person simply does not deserve to be in this deal with us. And while that may be true, if you want to operate as a force for karma in the universe, I have done it a couple of times where I've said, the bottom line is from a personal ethical standpoint, I do not want to reward your behavior. And I've done that before. However, I did it in a scenario where I had a backup deal already in the wings ready to go. So you can stand your ground and do those kinds of things. And I suggest that you do it. I think that feeling good about something is oftentimes as important as how much you're going to make out of it. Just closed an escrow. That's a perfect example where my client was someone who was getting super, super stressed about the transaction and the process. And I told them, I can get you more money for this property, but you need to give me 4 months. And that the whole concept of them having to deal with this pressure for 4 months literally almost brought them to tears. So we found another way to do it. We didn't make as much money. We made a decent amount of money. We made a halfway decent market level of money, but we made a decision based on things that mattered most, right? So I'm not suggesting you 100% disregard the emotional part of it, and here I am in the weeds again. But to return to the passive income discussion, you can decide if that's worth your sanity. For instance, that person I just mentioned where we had to make more of a decision based on not making her life stressful, there's no way that she could handle a passive income scenario where someone was renting the room downstairs or whatever, right? We have to make those calls. But let's get into the things that also generate passive income that are not like that. And again, we're going to do it in terms of the amount of sacrifice you have to make. So I'd say the highest level of sacrifice is this thing where you're renting out to another human being. Just because you're going to have to collide with their foibles and whatever's going on with their life is potentially going to impact your night. Next would be allowing some other organization to use your land for some purpose. And even within this are gradations, right? So you could have land. Let's say one of the benefits of your property is that it's a few acres big. Let's say it's 5 acres. And you have neighbors who have horses or neighbors who have livestock of some kind, and for a nominal fee, you're going to let their animals graze on your land, right? Or maybe it's not even for money. Maybe it's you want to live up to your responsibility as a homeowner to keep fire hazards down. So you invite neighbors with goats and sheep and horses and whatever else to come and graze on your land, right? So it's not a monetary income, but it's now something you don't have to pay someone to do to come and cut your grass, or you don't have to cut your grass. So you've bought yourself some time, right? That one is probably the least annoying in this spectrum. But now we get to things like vineyards. Now, for some of you, this may not make much sense. Maybe you come from a part of the country where vineyards are not a thing. I happen to live in an area where vineyards are a thing, and a huge, trendy status symbol thing in some communities here is that you will buy yourself a home, and it might have an acre or two. Most of the ones I've seen are under 2. And a huge chunk of your land is a vineyard. You don't maintain the vineyard. You don't do anything to the vineyard, but some other people come on your land and maintain the vineyard, harvest the grapes, and then you're paid some fee for allowing them to use your land. There's even a community in Gilroy where that's how they were built. The entire community was built in cooperation with a vineyard, and this stuff just happens, right? Normally, and there's some organizations where it's not even money that goes directly to you. It would go like to the HOA, and then that would offset whatever you would normally pay the HOA. But then there's other places where you own the land privately, you're not part of an HOA, and you're letting someone else use your land for something. It could be an easement. Easements are awesome. We've talked about this on shows in the past where someone bought land and discovered that the road that led to a business next door was actually on their property. And as soon as they made that assertion to the company said, well, how about if we pay you X amount of dollars per month to use the road, right? Passive income. And that one's great. That's right up. That actually is right up there with the one I'm going to say is so awesome when we get to a little further on in this. But it could be anything. It doesn't have to be. It could be anything for which someone else wants to use your land for. Now, how do you get your hands on some of this passive income? Well, renting out is clearly an easy one. It's a question of simply posting what you're going to rent up on places like Zillow and Trulia or wherever else you want to do it, and people will call you and you'll rent it and you'll make money, but you'll have to deal with the associated pain in the butt stuff. And the key here is to figure out what is it your property has to offer that is relatively unique, that would make it something attractive to someone who might want to pay you for the use of your land. Other things you could do is I've had guys who had 6 acres, 5 acres, 4 acres, 3 acres, and offered to let folks park their recreational vehicles on part of their lot. That represented some risks, right? Because he had some insurance concerns. He had a lawyer write up some documents, and he ended up with 6 people parking 6 RVs. He looked at what the cheapest option was within 5 miles to do that, found that the cheapest place was $150 a month, and he charged $125. And he's done. So he ended up 125 times 6, right? So he ended up increasing his monthly income by that amount of money. He has a padlock on the gate part that leads to that part of the property, and he simply gives each one of those people a key to the gate. He even went ahead and installed a wireless camera so that there's like a level of security of who's coming and going, and he's done. I think, and the grand total cost on that to get that camera thing going, we were talking about this the other day, he ended up buying one of those, I think it was a Ring thing, but he bought a camera, put it up on a post. It gets solar charged. It connects to his Wi-Fi, and it literally costs him $30 a year for the video to get stored in the cloud every time anything moves in that area. So for my money, I think the camera only cost him $200, which is a one-time cost. So that's awesome. If you're someone who's looking at securing something, I've now got one, and I'm thinking about putting one on my rental property in Hawaii because that would be awesome. But anyway, I digress again. So you need to find things about your property that you could use to potentially make some money. Now, you're going to have problems if you're in an HOA, for instance. Now, I have enough land here that I could easily park 4 or 5 RVs on the back of my lot, but that's not allowed by the HOA, so I can't do that. I could build a storage shed on the back of my lot. That's allowed. And instead of using it myself, I could rent it to someone else. Do you need storage? Okay, well, if you were to rent a 10 by 10 storage unit in Morgan Hill, it would probably cost you $250 a month. I will do one for $190, right? Lots of ways to get passive income. And they have varying levels of annoyingness as it relates to you, right? So anything that you could do, and as long as you're working within the rules, laws, regulations, whatever, these are all ways that you could make some passive income. All right. So let me hit you with awesome passive income. We're going to talk about the property that I currently have a listing on. The address is 16605 Finley Ridge Road in Morgan Hill, California. And if you see it on Google, you're going to immediately see it's out of town. Now it's a 100% off-grid, eco-friendly home. It is solar powered with batteries. It's got a well. It's got a septic tank. No power comes to the house. No telephone service comes to the house. No nothing. So that's all. Actually, I think telephone service may actually come. I think I've seen wires for that. Anyway, the point being that this property is 21 plus acres, 22 acres, and has lots of room. It's got the home itself is on a nice flat pad. There's other relatively flat areas, but the steepest part of this lot, the nearly vertical part, which there isn't a whole lot of, maybe 3 or 4 acres worth, is facing to the west. And it's not called Finley Ridge Road for any tricky reasons. It's actually on a ridge, and it overlooks the entire valley from Gilroy to San Jose. So it is an amazing view lot. You'll see that if you go visit it on Zillow or anywhere else, you can take a look at those photos and see what kind of view it's got, and can imagine, wow, with this kind of a view of the area, what benefits might that bring to me? Well, in the case of this property, it was a telecom company who wanted to install antennas for direct line of sight internet. Now, we've talked about direct line of sight internet here before. I had a property that I had for sale probably back 2012. And back then I mentioned it because at that time it was an amazing property. It had a great solar panel setup. Even though it had power coming to the house, it had these sun tracking solar panels that were super high end. And we got to talking about line of sight internet, which is something that they had as well, and how great it was and how it was getting great bandwidth, and it was kind of amazing and miraculous, and talking about how you could leverage that in terms of if you wanted to live more in a more rural environment but still get really great internet. You don't have to use satellite internet. You can use direct line of sight. Okay. So this telecom company approaches them, and I actually, when these folks bought this house that they're in right now that I'm currently trying to sell, I helped them buy it. So I represented them when they were the buyers of this property, and this deal was not there. Well, at some point, this telecom company approached my homeowners and said, hey, we would like to install these antennas, and we will pay you X amount of dollars, and for each antenna we add to this rack that we put out there, we'll increase it. So not only did they start out with some amount of money, I think they started off with $500, $600 extra a month, which is nice, nothing to sneeze at. But every single time they installed this one horizontal rack, and every time they added a new antenna, the amount went up by $100. Well, it's now at $2,200. When I started this listing a month and a half ago, it was at $2,100. So just since I listed it, it's already gone up another $100. And my understanding is this company is asking if they can add another rack below the existing rack. The existing rack is already virtually out of view. You can just get a peek of it as you're looking at the view. You can be able to see it in the photos if you go take a look on the websites. But if they do it below it, it will be zero visibility to the house. These will not be anything you can even see. And it's a super steep part of the lot. So why is this the best kind of passive income? Because it uses a resource you yourself would not use relating to your property. Now remember, it's the steepest part of the lot. If you wanted to build something on that, the engineering costs in terms of foundations and other things would be prohibitively expensive. It would be idiotic to try to build something there. So it is the most useless part of the property. A part of the property you never see because you'd have to walk over to the edge of the property and look down to even see it. And you're turning this relatively small footprint area. This isn't vineyards, right? Vineyards take up a ton of land. This is a lot where you could still do all the things you want to do relating to horses or livestock or building a barn or whatever you want to do because you're not sacrificing a lot of floor space. So in terms of lot space, you're getting an amazing bang for the buck for the square footage. It's basic. There's a little shed there. Everything is off your connection, so it's not sucking power from the house. They've got their own solar panels. They've got their own batteries. They've got their own generator. They've got it all self-contained, and maybe once a month or as needed, technicians come up and do service on the equipment. The other great thing about this is it's a telecom company. So as part of the deal, they give this home free high-speed internet that is faster than the internet speeds I get from my cable connection at my house here in Morgan Hill. So ridiculous, right? A grand total of $2,400 a month of value or passive income that you get from this particular property. Now, at the price point that this home is offered at, $1.2 million, if you came in with a typical offer, a conventional offer where you put 20% down and finance the rest, that $2,200 is about half of your mortgage payment. So your mortgage payment drops from about $4,800 to $2,400. That's lower than my mortgage payment for my house that cost half that. So kind of amazing. Now, let's pretend that this company goes ahead and adds that second rack. Well, with one rack, we're at $2,400 or $2,200. Imagine where you go when that second rack gets installed. In short order, you're probably at the point where you're up to about $4,000, $4,000 plus. And if both racks get completely full, your mortgage is completely paid by this passive income. Now, that's kind of amazing. As far as I'm concerned, passive income is a great thing. In terms of my personal happiness, I probably don't want to do the whole people living right in my house thing. I've thought about it. I've considered it as an option. But you're definitely in your mind are thinking, how much is it worth the amount of money I'll make by doing this? In a scenario like this, there is no better kind of passive income than something like this. So now, is this going to work for every suburban home? No, obviously it's not. But let's say that you do want to try to take advantage of this. Now, I used the example before of an RV. Well, if you are a person who owns a property that has an RV, why not go ahead, that has an RV parking space, but you don't have an RV? Why wouldn't you just go up on Craigslist or wherever you want and advertise the space for rent for them to park their RV? I was actually looking. For those of you who've been longtime listeners, you know that I started the process of working up to get my home sold. I was going to sell my home, take that money and invest it in other things. I've since considered other options like renting it and moving into another home where the positive cash flow here would just make my general cash flow really blossom. And I was thinking about this as I was looking at, because I'm considering doing a rental home scenario where I rent a home and kind of wait for the market to do its thing and then jump in and start buying properties when the market takes a little bit of a turn. And I'm going to make an interesting comment about that before we finish off the show in a few minutes, because I've gotten a lot of very interesting emails over the last 24 hours that I think are informative. I thought that I had found this one home that was a 2-acre rental. The home itself was a little rough. It was an older house. I'd have to make a lot of sacrifices personally in terms of how I'm living, everything from the size of the bathrooms to no air conditioning to other things. I may sound a little spoiled. I apologize, but I've been spoiled for a long time where I live now. But then I thought, God, I doubt I could get the landlord to agree to this, but why couldn't I do with this amount of space that I'm not going to use? Why couldn't I get RVs parked here and charge, say, $120 a pop, and basically bring my rent down another $200 or $300 by having 2 or 3 RVs parked in the lot. So if you've got the opportunity to do these kinds of things, I think it's worth it to think it through, kind of put on your thinking cap and realize here are different ways I could actually improve passive income or get any at all passive income in my flow. So now for those of you who may live in the area or you're thinking about moving to the area, and for those of you again who've been listening for a long time, know I do not tend to promote my listings on the show. I've sold plenty of homes where I've never even mentioned them on the show. I consider this one to be such a unique opportunity. I think it is worth your time if you're considering moving to the area. If you already live in the area and you're looking for something that's going to give you amazing privacy and the other thing that's going on here in California, PG&E has had a lot of troubles over the last couple of years. They have already sent emails to subscribers like myself. PG&E is our power company out here in California, that we are to expect an increase in rates. Imagine being a scenario where your rates never go up. Your electricity is coming from the sun. It is now at a situation where it is cheaper for you to have your home be solar powered and enjoy your power that way. The costs involved in maintaining your solar power system are cheaper than if you were to do PG&E. It's been a long time for a lot of folks who have solar power for this moment to come, when it becomes more financially viable to do solar power than to do connected to the street power. But we're there. And given the space this offers, given the passive income, anybody who's interested, I want you to get in contact with me. Now, of course, you can reach out to me through the website at www.therebelbroker.com, or you can go to www.soldbyrobert.com. One is sort of the show page. The other one is sort of my business page. So feel free, but you can also check. You don't have to talk to me directly. If you want to check it out on your own, you can just Google 16605 Finley Ridge Road, or go to Zillow and type in 16605 Finley Ridge Road. And you can take a look for it yourself. There's some great 360 3D home tours up there as well, so you can check it out for yourself. Now, as I promised, one other neat little tidbit is I follow a pretty good set of communities. In fact, you know what? Let me bring it up right now and I'll read it off to you. Now, these are communities I'm keeping an eye on for investing. There are communities where I have read articles on their potential growth, areas that I'm just interested in. Some of them will be familiar to you because I've talked about them before. A lot of these are areas around Phoenix, but I thought I would share them with you here. And there's one on here that I added strictly based on what an article said, and I'm now questioning it because I'm not 100% sure. But let me hit you with them. So first is Mesa, Arizona. Next is Tucson, Arizona. Gilbert, Arizona. Roseville, California. Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Boise, Idaho. And then, of course, there's also Chattanooga, Tennessee. Right? We've mentioned Chattanooga before, so I still get my Chattanooga emails. Now, this is the way I keep up with properties outside of my area relating to what listings come online. So here's the amazing thing. First, all of these areas have relatively amazingly low barriers to entry. So if you're looking to do your first investment property, in a lot of these cases, we're talking properties that are under $200,000. So that's pretty good. Roseville is very surprising. Roseville is between Sacramento and Auburn. I actually think that's got some pretty good potential. I'm not sure if it's at the top of my list, but it's on my list enough that I've driven up there a couple of times to look at places. But here's what's interesting. We talk on this show a lot about what to look for, what are signs and symptoms of a pivoting or changing market. Well, over the last week or so, the most common emails I have been getting on properties that I'm subscribing to through this, for instance, on Trulia, is price reductions. From everywhere from Mason, the ones today that kind of inspired me to mention them in today's show were all from Mesa, Tucson, Gilbert. I mean, So, I mean, Tucson is slightly out there, but Mesa and Gilbert are right there next to Phoenix. Really interesting to me that those prices are dropping, because every once in a while that was happening, but this is the first time in the course of a week I've seen so many. I've seen at least 4 times more notifications that prices were reduced on listings now than in a previous month. Now, another explanation could be cyclical, right? It could simply be, here we are at the end of May. Maybe folks are feeling a little bit of stress, so they're feeling like they might miss the bus on the market. My guess would be that in these markets, that's not quite true yet. We wouldn't expect folks to be dropping these prices until the middle of June or late June. So I think that what we're seeing may actually just simply be a trend in decreased buyers and the market naturally responding to that. So take a look at your local market, see if you're seeing the same thing. I'd love to hear back from you if it is happening. As always, I love getting stories from listeners, and I like sharing them here on the show whenever you feel inspired to share them with me. So, all right, folks, that's about it for today. I hope it has been informative. The goal of the show is always to leave more knowledge on the table than I take up in your valuable time. Hope we've achieved that today. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to y'all next time.